I'm Idiotech, and this is my review of Ghost Recon Wildlands for PC. The game retails for $60 US and is brought to you by Ubisoft. So what is Ghost Recon Wildlands? Well, it's Far Cry without any of the interesting characters and storytelling. Now, that may come across as quite harsh, but that's the reality of the situation here. This game has a number of things about it that are good, and I will get into those. But the majority of my experience in my 15 to 20 hours of play was repetitive and completely limited when it came to storytelling and character development. There are a number of issues alongside bugs, poor driving and flying physics, poor performance, respawning enemies, disappointing boss battles, limited squad controls. The game has its fucking issues, so we'll get to those. But first, let's talk about what's good, shall we? Let's start on a positive note here. The visuals are quite impressive. When you consider the size of the world, which is huge, I mean absolutely enormous, it's quite impressive. Up close, some of the textures don't hold up, some of the grass looks a bit weird, but overall, it's a pretty damn impressive game on a visual level. The environmental variety on offer here is enormous. It's great. You've got snowy mountains, tundras, swamps, pine forests. There's a lot of visual variety here and some quite big city environments to explore as well. The scale of the map, as I said, is giant, absolutely enormous. And the sound design is really good, really satisfying sound design.
That's a kill.
And the weapon and combat system as well is pretty decent. It's a third-person shooter, but when you aim down sights, it becomes a first-person shooter. And there is bullet drop in the game, so that gives you a little bit of something else to pay attention to. The key focus, though, when it comes to good things is the progression system, and it is handled quite well. You have a skill tree where you unlock new abilities, such as drone abilities, player abilities, weapon abilities, squad abilities, rebel support abilities. There's tons of different things here. You can make your drone more stealthy, you can give it more battery life, you can give it greater range, you can increase the accuracy of your weapons, you can give yourself more C4 or more grenades. And you progress through that by unlocking skill points, which you do by leveling and finding them throughout the world, and finding supplies for the rebels, and you use all of those things to upgrade your character. It's a compelling enough system. It does improve gameplay as you play the game. You know, you get access to better things like night vision, or parachutes, or thermal vision. All of those things are really nice, and you do feel that cool sense of character progression as you play through the game. The weapon customization systems are also pretty fucking cool. You've got a ton of weapons in the game, an absolute metric ton of weapons in this game. However, you can buy them all with microtransactions, and I will get to that later as well. But there are a lot of weapons in this game, and the way you obtain them is by interrogating people or finding documents that tell you where they are on the map. Once you know that information, you go and pick them up, and then you can customize them with various attachments you also find in the world. It gives you this explosive diagram of the weapon, and you can change every single element of it, as well as add your own paint jobs, which I also liked. There's character customization as well, and while some of the options here are quite limited, there should be more beards, Ubisoft. Fix your beard system. The same problem with The Division, they just didn't have enough physical characteristics for your character, so everyone kind of ended up looking the same. But it's still there nonetheless. You can equip different types of gear, different vests, and you can make your character look pretty cool. So that whole system is very enjoyable, and it is primarily what the game is centered around. Without that progression system, there really wouldn't be much in this game. We have 4 factions. We have your faction, you're playing as these Spec Ops guys. You have Unidad, which is the government, and they operate like police in GTA. If you piss them off, they escalate, and eventually they'll come after you with armored vehicles and helicopters and things along those lines. Next up, we have the rebels. Now, in this game, it's set in Bolivia. A Mexican drug cartel has moved to Bolivia. It's run by a guy called El Sueño. El Sueño is trying to set up a narco state. And the rebels are the people we're supporting in the game. We're helping fund them, we're giving them resources, we're helping them with their operations. And once we've done that, we destabilize the nation and take over from the cartel. Finally, we have the cartel, which is the bad guys in the game. Each zone has a leader. You go into that zone, you find information about that leader, and you sabotage their operations, usually resulting in you killing them at the end of the zone. They give you this giant tree of bosses and various leaders that you have to work your way through until you finally get to the end boss of the game, who is El Sueño. Now, I like that system. You know, I like the idea of going around and taking out small guys and working your way slowly to the top and collecting intel. That's a nice system. Finally, we have 4-player co-op, which is really how this game is designed to be played. Now, it does play very well in single player, and the AI is good in the sense that it doesn't get detected when it's not supposed to, and it follows your orders. So it works, but there isn't really enough depth to those systems, and I will talk about that as well. So, what we have here is a pretty bog standard open world game. It has progression systems, it has weapon progression, it has character progression, and, you know, that's kind of it. A big map, lots of map mess, lots of things to do, but none of those things are particularly compelling. And I do like the fact that there are different factions and that you have rebel support and you have the cartel who you're primarily fighting, but then you also have the government. I like those systems. It takes a number of things from different open world games and sort of mashes them together, and that's all cool. The problem is, the gameplay loop is extremely repetitive, so let's talk about that now. What's bad about this game? Well, the gameplay, sadly. The way it works is this: you enter a new zone, you collect intel, that leads you on to missions to destabilize the operations in that area, you interrogate people, you find out where the weapon caches are, where the certain supplies are that you need for the rebels, and you just go about completing these missions. And what happens is, you go to the mission area, you pull out your drone, you mark all the targets, you tell your AI buddies or your friends that you're playing with to shoot the people, you shoot the people, you go in and you press E on some crates, or you blow up a submarine, or you steal a car, or you kill a guy. And then you repeat that process 100,000 times. Nothing changes. Everything you do in the first tutorialized area of this game, you will be doing at the end of the game. That's a problem, because the game becomes extremely boring after about 5 hours of play. Now, as I said, I've spent about 15 to 20 hours in the game, and I did that primarily to see if the story was going to go anywhere, and to see if the gameplay loop did change at all, and it didn't, in any way. Another problem this game has is its limited story and character development. This game presents you with a big bad guy, El Sueño, but you never meet El Sueño, you only ever see him in a cutscene at the beginning of the game. After 15 to 20 hours in this game, I have yet to interact with El Sueño, so unlike Far Cry, you're not immediately presented with an antagonist to care about or to want to kill. In this game, you have to fight his little mob people and then work up to his slightly higher up mob people and then finally work up to him. When you do encounter those other people, you just shoot them in the head and that's it. There's no cutscene, there's no cool moment, there's no storytelling, you just shoot him in the head and then your CIA operative says, okay, move on to the next zone. It's very anticlimactic every time you kill a boss in this game. None of the characters or bosses really have much going for them in terms of story. It's not engaging in the way that it is in Far Cry, for example. It doesn't have a narrative thread which gives you a reason to go to the next zone to do the things you have to do. And without that, it kind of feels like an MMO, which is not great when you're only playing with yourself or 2 or 3 other buddies. So yeah, limited story and character development. We have poor driving mechanics and flying physics. Now, the driving mechanics you do get used to after a while, but they are not good by any means, and you will constantly find yourself crashing into things and flying off cliffs. However, the flying physics in this game are absolutely atrocious. To throttle up, you press shift, but to move forward, you press W, right? So, okay, fine. But when you do that, you dive into the ground, so you're constantly having to come off the throttle, press W for a while, come off W, press shift for a while. You're just going up and then forward and then down and then up and then forward and then down and then up and then forward and then down. It's terrible. Now you can turn on mouse movement, but that isn't any better. So the flying and driving physics in this game are abysmal. And seeing as you're going to spend most of your time traversing the environment, that's kind of a problem. Next up, we have poor performance. The game does not run particularly well. It's not the worst I've ever seen by any stretch of the imagination, but on a GTX 980 on high settings, I was getting drops down to 45 FPS. There's very high and ultra above that, so unless you're running at 1080, you're going to have issues getting this thing to run maxed out at 1080p on pretty much any graphics card available. We have respawning enemies, so the way the game works is this: when you clear an area, you're thinking to yourself, well cool, the rebels will come in and take this over like they do in Far Cry. But again, it doesn't do that, What happens is you leave the area and the enemies respawn, so next time you walk through that location, you have to fight the exact same enemies over again. I think that could have easily been solved by just saying, hey, rebel forces now own this area. It's a bit weird they chose not to do that, and it leads to you going, hang on, I'm killing the exact same dudes in the exact same place 3 times in a row now because I happen to need to move through that area. It's a bit annoying, to say the least. The enemy AI is poor. If you shoot guys right next to other guys, most of the time they don't react. Now, if they're within like 5 to 10 feet, yes, they will. But you can shoot a guy and then he'll walk around the corner and not see him dead on the ground. They're pretty basic. However, because you have such limited health, what happens is if you trigger the entire base of 15 to 20 people, you'll die pretty quick. Not because the game is necessarily difficult or because the AI is good, just because you have very low health and taking a couple of bullets to the chest will kill you. But they're pretty dumb. And I found a pretty simple strategy to clear any base in the game was just to use the sync kill system, which allows you to tell your AI friends or your teammates to kill specific targets as soon as you fire or give the order. So what I would do is I'd just say, okay, kill that guy, and that guy, hit Q to trigger it, okay, wait for that to come off cooldown, kill that guy, and that guy, okay, hit Q, done, wait for that to come off cooldown, and just do that until the base was cleared, walk in and walk out. Now that's not the most enjoyable way to play the game, obviously, but it is kind of the most efficient, and it limits the risk of being caught, killed, and having to restart the mission, which is another thing in this game. Every time you fail a mission, you restart and you're sent back to a spawn area and you have to make your way back to the objective, which can be quite frustrating. It doesn't feel difficult in the sense that Dark Souls does, where it's a very skill-driven experience. It feels difficult because the odds are stacked against you. The AI itself, though, is pretty dumb. Finally, limited squad controls. Now, for a Ghost Recon game, a tactics shooter, this isn't a very tactical experience. You can control your squad in a couple of ways. You can tell them to fire, you can tell them to hold position, you can tell them to regroup, and you can tell them to go to a specific area as a group. That's it. There's not much depth here when it comes to tactics, when it comes to tactical gameplay. This is not Armor by any stretch of the imagination. If you're expecting that kind of experience, you're not going to get it. Now, it will obviously be more tactical if you're playing with friends. If you're playing with 4 of your friends, obviously you can be more tactical, but when you're playing in solo mode, that's not the case. The final question is, should you buy this game? The answer is no. And it's sad to have to say that because there's a lot of effort that's gone into this game in certain areas. It has a decent progression system, it has really nice visuals, great environmental variety, a huge map. But when it comes down to it, the core gameplay loop is extremely repetitive. And that lack of storytelling, that lack of good character development, just kills any incentive I have to continue playing. Add to that microtransactions, which I failed to mention in my negative section, where you can just go and buy the grind away. All the weapons and all the customization and all the stuff in the game, you can just buy that for money. So if you don't want to grind, then just buy it for money. Which is weird, and there's nothing wrong with it necessarily on a competitive level because the game isn't competitive in any way. But still, it's like cheat codes for money. And the entire game is grinding. The entire game is collecting information, collecting intel, picking up those weapons, picking up those supplies, leveling up your character. So if you buy that away, there really isn't any game left, which is kind of weird. But yeah, there's microtransactions. I forgot to mention that. So look, I mean, if you like open world games for the mindless grind, right? If you like them for mindless grinding and not for storytelling, and not for cool moments, and you just want to go to point A, kill some dudes, pick up a thing. Go to point B, kill some dudes, pick up a thing. And you want to do that 100,000 times in a pretty well realized Bolivia, you might enjoy the game, especially if you have some friends to play with. For everyone else, I would very much avoid this title, at least until maybe it's like $10, $20 on sale a few years down the line, because you're really not missing anything here you haven't already experienced in any other open world game before it. If you found this video helpful or useful in some way and you want to support this channel, you can do so in one of 3 ways. First, you can use my Green Man Gaming affiliate link in the description box below to buy this game or any other game. You can also support me on Patreon directly, you'll find a link to that below as well. If you don't want to do either of those things, the best thing you can do to help this channel is to share my content. Share it with your friends, share it on social media, it really helps the channel grow. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.